My dad never had to raise his voice to hurt me. His disappointment was quieter than that, sharper. It came in small comments at first. You're not serious about life. You don't have your brother's focus. You're wasting your potential. I told myself he was just being strict, motivational, old school. But one night, during a family dinner, the words changed. We were sitting around the table, relatives visiting, plates half finished, casual laughter filling the room. My uncle asked what I was doing these days. Before I could answer, my dad did. He's still figuring it out, he said with a thin smile. No degree. No real job. A few chuckles. Then he looked directly at me. You know what your problem is? He said. You're uneducated and, honestly, worthless if you keep going like this. The word hung in the air. Worthless. No one corrected him. My mom stared at her plate. My brother shifted uncomfortably. Someone changed the subject. And I sat there, nodding slightly, pretending it didn't hit. But it did. Because the truth was he didn't know what I was doing. He didn't know about the late nights. The risks I had taken. The plans I was building quietly behind the scenes. To him, I was a dropout. Directionless. Embarrassing. What he didn't understand was this. I wasn't behind. I was early. And one day, very soon, he would find out exactly who I really was. In my father's world, there was only one definition of success. A degree framed on the wall. A steady corporate job. A title that sounded impressive at dinner parties. My older brother fit that definition perfectly. He graduated with honors in business. Wore tailored suits. Spoke confidently about quarterly growth and market trends. My dad introduced him proudly to anyone who would listen. This one, he'd say, clapping him on the back, he's going places. Then there was me. I dropped out of college in my second year. Not because I couldn't handle the work. Because I had found something that excited me more than lectures and textbooks. I had an idea for an online platform. A risky one. An unconventional one. To my father, that translated into one word: failure. You quit, he said the day I told him. Quitters don't win. From that moment on, every comparison felt heavier. At family gatherings, it became a pattern. Someone would ask my brother about his promotion. My dad would beam with pride. Then someone would glance at me. And what about you? Before I could respond, my father usually did. He's still trying to figure life out, he'd say. Some people learn the hard way. The laughter wasn't cruel. It was casual. But casual dismissal can cut deeper than open hostility. I wasn't lazy. I was working, just not in a way that impressed him. I was teaching myself coding at night, studying digital marketing strategies, watching free lectures on entrepreneurship, testing small projects that failed more often than they succeeded. But because there was no diploma, no office, no business card, in his eyes, there was no progress. Once, during a heated argument, he said something that stuck with me. You know what your brother has that you don't? Discipline. That word followed me everywhere. Discipline. As if the nights I stayed up researching were indulgence. As if taking a risk required less courage than following a safe path. The comparisons didn't just come from him. Relatives picked up on it. Friends noticed the tone. My brother tried to defend me once. Dad, he's working on something, he said carefully. My father waved him off. Dreams don't pay bills. That was the irony. I wasn't dreaming anymore. I was building. Quietly. Without applause. And while everyone saw me as the son who dropped out, I was becoming something none of them expected. But until there was proof, visible, undeniable proof, I would always be the comparison. The cautionary tale. The what not to do. And maybe that's what hurt the most. Not that he doubted me, but that he never once considered the possibility that I might actually know what I was doing. What my father saw was a dropout sleeping late. What he didn't see were the 2 a.m. strategy sessions at my desk. After leaving college, I moved back home to save money. That alone felt like proof to him that I had failed. But every dollar I saved went into building something bigger than comfort. I turned my small bedroom into a workspace. Second-hand laptop. Free design software. Sticky notes covering the wall with ideas, funnels, numbers. During the day, I worked a part-time warehouse job to cover basic expenses. It wasn't glamorous, but it bought me time. Time was my real investment. At night, I studied. Not casually. Obsessively. Marketing psychology. Brand positioning. Consumer behavior. Sales funnels. Email sequences. While my brother climbed the corporate ladder step by step, I was trying to build my own ladder from scratch. And I failed. Repeatedly. My first online store made $137 in 3 months. My second lost money. My third never even launched because I ran out of funds. There were nights I stared at my screen wondering if my father was right. Maybe I had confused ambition with arrogance. Maybe I wasn't disciplined. Maybe I was just avoiding the traditional path because I was afraid I couldn't succeed in it. But every time doubt crept in, something else answered it. Progress. Tiny, invisible progress. A better ad strategy. A cleaner website layout. An email campaign that actually converted. Small wins that no one applauded. Silence can be dangerous. But it can also be powerful. Because while my family measured success by visible milestones, promotions, paychecks, titles, I was measuring mine by skill growth. By knowledge. By control. Year 2 was the hardest. Savings gone. Credit card nearly maxed. Friends moving forward in conventional careers. And me? Still figuring it out. That phrase echoed in my head like a verdict. Until something shifted. It wasn't dramatic. It was data. One product I launched started performing better than expected. The ad engagement was strong. Conversion rates were higher. Customers were returning. Instead of celebrating, I analyzed. Scaled slowly, carefully. Reinvested profits instead of spending them. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving month to month. I was building momentum. Revenue grew quietly. Not millions overnight, but consistent. Real. Enough to pay off my credit card. Enough to upgrade my equipment. Enough to realize something important. This wasn't luck. This was skill. And the more I learned, the less I needed validation. My father still introduced me as the one trying to start something. He didn't know I had already started. He didn't know that I had formed an LLC, opened business accounts, negotiated supplier contracts. He didn't know that every insult had fueled focus instead of insecurity. Because here's the truth about being underestimated. It removes pressure. No expectations. No spotlight. Just freedom to fail privately and improve quietly. By year 3, I wasn't chasing success anymore. I was managing it. And still, he had no idea who I was becoming. Not the dropout. Not the dreamer. But the builder. And when the moment finally came for him to see it, it wouldn't be loud. It would be undeniable. By year 4, everything looked different. Not on social media. Not at family gatherings. But on paper. Revenue reports had replaced wishful thinking. Contracts had replaced experiments. I had a small remote team handling customer service and logistics. What started in my bedroom had grown into a structured, legitimate company. The irony? My father still believed I was trying things. He never asked for details. He never wanted to understand the business model. In his mind, if it wasn't brick and mortar or corporate, it wasn't stable. Meanwhile, something else was happening. My father's company, mid-sized, traditional, slow to adapt, had been struggling. Increased competition. Digital disruption. Shrinking margins. He mentioned it casually one evening, frustration hidden behind pride. Market's changing, he said. Too many new players who don't understand real business. I almost smiled at that. Because one of those new players was me. Not directly competing at first, but operating in the same industry, digitally, leaner, faster. While he relied on decades-old systems, I relied on analytics dashboards. While he trusted tradition, I trusted data. Over time, our paths started overlapping more clearly. One of his largest competitors was a company I had quietly partnered with months earlier. They had the infrastructure. I had the digital growth strategy. Together, we scaled aggressively. Eventually, an acquisition opportunity emerged. Negotiations took months. Lawyers, NDAs, late-night calls across time zones. I never once thought about revenge. This wasn't about humiliating my father. It was about growth. But I was aware of the symbolism. If the deal closed, I wouldn't just be successful. I would be powerful in the very space he believed I didn't belong. The acquisition finalized 2 weeks before his 60th birthday. The press release went live online the morning of his celebration dinner. I didn't send it to him. I didn't text the link. I didn't announce it on social media. Because part of me knew the moment would reveal itself. That evening, the house was full. Relatives, old colleagues, family, friends. The same dining table where he had once called me worthless. He stood at the head, giving a speech about legacy, discipline, and hard work. To building something that lasts, he said proudly. To real business. Applause followed. Then, like always, someone asked about his children. My brother spoke about a new promotion. More applause. Then eyes turned toward me. My father chuckled lightly. He's still exploring different paths, he said. Some lessons take longer. Soft laughter. The old script. The familiar narrative. Except this time, it wasn't accurate. I felt calm, almost detached. No anger. No need to attack. Just clarity. I stood slowly, glass in hand. Actually, I said evenly, I wanted to share something tonight too. The room quieted. My father raised an eyebrow, amused more than concerned. I continued. I'm the founder of Horizon Digital Group. A few confused looks. The company that just finalized the acquisition of Sterling Industries' primary competitor. The name hit the room like a shift in gravity. Sterling Industries. My father's biggest rival. Silence replaced laughter. He stared at me, searching for a punchline. There wasn't one. And in that suspended moment, before explanation, before reaction, the identity he had assigned me for years began to crack. At first, no one spoke. My father blinked, as if waiting for me to smile and admit it was a joke. You, he asked finally. Not aggressively, just confused. Yes, I said calmly. I pulled out my phone and opened the press release. My name was there in bold letters. Founder. CEO. Lead strategist behind the acquisition. I walked around the table and placed the phone in front of him. The room leaned in. He adjusted his glasses and read silently. Line by line. I watched his expression change, not dramatically, but noticeably. The certainty faded first. Then the dismissal. Then something else. Recognition. This can't be right, he muttered. It is, I replied. The deal closed 2 weeks ago. Someone across the table whispered, wait, that company just doubled its valuation. Another relative pulled out their own phone, searching. Confirmation spread faster than explanation. My father looked up at me, not as a child, not as a disappointment. As a peer. When did this happen? He asked. Over the last 4 years, I answered. There was no anger in my voice. Just fact. I wasn't lost, I continued quietly. I was building. The words didn't accuse. They clarified. He leaned back in his chair, absorbing it. For years, he had measured me against traditional milestones. Degrees, promotions, titles. He never considered that I might be creating my own. I thought you were wasting time, he said. I know, I replied. That was the moment everything changed. Not when the room realized. Not when relatives started congratulating me. But when my father's posture shifted. The authority he carried so confidently around me softened. Not diminished. Adjusted. For the first time in my life, he didn't correct me. Didn't interrupt. Didn't laugh. He asked questions. How many employees? What's the revenue model? What's your long-term strategy? Real questions. Respectful ones. And I answered each calmly. Not to impress him. Not to dominate the moment. But because I finally could. After years of being called uneducated, undisciplined, worthless. I didn't need to raise my voice. The proof was already built. And as the room slowly filled with congratulations, I realized something powerful. Success doesn't argue. It reveals. And in that quiet, undeniable reveal, the word worthless lost its meaning forever. The dinner never quite returned to normal. Conversations restarted, but softer, more cautious. Some relatives congratulated me with wide eyes, as if they were recalibrating years of assumptions in real time. Others avoided eye contact, embarrassed by how easily they had laughed before. My brother walked over first. You really did it, he said quietly, not threatened, just impressed. Yeah, I nodded. I did. But the moment that mattered came later. As guests began leaving and the house emptied, my father asked if we could talk privately. We stepped onto the back patio, the same place where he once lectured me about discipline and responsibility. For a few seconds, he said nothing. Then, why didn't you tell me? It wasn't anger. It was confusion. I tried, I said calmly. But you weren't listening. You had already decided who I was. He looked down at his hands. I thought I was pushing you to be better, he admitted. You were pushing, I replied, but not toward what I wanted to become. There was a long silence. I called you worthless, he said finally, the words sounding heavier now. I shouldn't have. That was the closest thing to an apology I had ever heard from him. And strangely, I didn't need more than that. I never was, I said gently. I just chose a different path. He nodded slowly. For the first time, there was no comparison to my brother. No lecture about tradition. No superiority. Just acknowledgement. The dynamic had shifted. Not because I humiliated him, but because I no longer needed his approval to stand tall. As I left that night, I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. Free from the label. Free from the comparison. Free from the need to prove myself ever again. Sometimes the people who call you worthless are only measuring you by what they understand. They mistake different for failure. Silence for weakness. Risk for irresponsibility. But worth isn't defined by tradition. It isn't stamped by a degree or validated by approval. It's built quietly through discipline no one sees. So if someone underestimates you, let them. You don't need to argue. You don't need to convince. Just build. Because one day, your results will speak so clearly, they won't be able to ignore who you really are.